If you guys enjoy what I do, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps the channel and it's free and easy to do. Before we get started with today's video, I have an announcement to make. After years of telling other people's stories, I finally released one of my own. My novel Eternal Reign is available now in both ebook and paperback format for those of you who are like me and prefer to collect physical media. You can grab a copy right now on Amazon through the link in the description of this video. And now back to our regularly scheduled program. In Final Fantasy XIV, we've traveled all over the place, from the deserts of Thanalan to the fractured surface of the moon and the frozen plains of Garlemald. We spent a lot of time in all of the zones, farming fates, hunting monsters, doing quests, filling out the sightseeing log, or just standing around talking to people. Lots of time and effort have been put into the design of each place, but some of them just stand out better than others. These are the 5 zones that over the increasingly growing number of hours I've put into Final Fantasy XIV, I've realized that I enjoyed more than the others. We have to start things off with Azizla. For the longest time, this was my favorite zone altogether. The scenery is so different from the rest of the Heavensward zones. After dealing with ice and forest for the entire expansion, you come to a place made entirely of Allegan tech, with everything from museums to research facilities. There are creatures that were built, modified, or imprisoned by the ancient Allegans, from small survey nodes to the insanely powerful dragon Tiamat. Not to mention the music sounds like something straight out of Tron. I love this place, and the fact that they keep sending us back there to draw on the knowledge of the ancient Allegans is great because every time we come here we get new lore, which is obviously my favorite part of the game. Next up is Mare Lamentorum. From the minute they announced Endwalker, we all knew that we were going to the moon, and the trek through Garlemald and the dungeon and such that led to our trip into space did not disappoint in the least. When you arrive, the cracked gray landscape is something to marvel at, and a bit annoying to navigate without the ability to fly, but it leads you to the greatest creatures Final Fantasy XIV has to offer, the Loporrits, also known as the Moon Bunnies. I'll go into the lore of the Moon Bunnies when I cover more of Endwalker's MSQ, but just know that they are far less annoying than the Moogles, and their names give some type of idea about their individual specialties, like Puddingway, who specializes in eating all types of pudding. It's not the most useful skill, but pudding is delicious, so I can understand the love of the gooey snack. After exploring the semi-barren surface of the moon, the very high-tech home of the bunny rabbits is an impressive change. The design alone makes me positive that the Loporrits will be the crafting tribe for this expansion, especially when you take a look at Smileton, which was supposed to be a residential district, but the Loporrits came closer to building a murder dome than a subdivision. Either way, working with them will never be boring. Next up, we leave the surface of the moon and head into the depths of the ocean of Norvrant. We're going to my third favorite zone, the Tempest. While most of the zone design for Shadowbringers was pretty, they weren't all that unique, not until you have to use the Primal Bismarck to create an air bubble under the ocean that pushes the water away and gives you a place to explore. There were other underwater locations in Stormblood that came after the Warrior of Light got the Kojin blessing for underwater breathing, but they seem like test runs for the Tempest. The underwater realm of the Ondo is a visual marvel that the music enhances as you hunt for Emmett Selk, which leads you to the city of Amarat, a place that the Ascian recreated because he missed his friends and family. It was the first time you got a taste of the world unsundered, and being there was extremely satisfying, at least until I unlocked the Amarat dungeon and it became the only dungeon that would pop in my roulette for months. Our next stop is the final zone of Endwalker, Ultima Thule. At first I thought I only liked the place because of what led up to it and all of the things that happened there, but after doing a lot of fates and hunts in the dark and gloomy edge of the universe, I realized that I genuinely enjoyed the zone. I won't talk about the story in this video, but the place contains 3 unique groups that make for some interesting quests, fates, and 2 dungeons that are great. The dragons, which need no introduction, the Omicron, which were named before the variant of the disease that caused us to be inside for years, and the EA, who I really hope we get more information about. The Omicron are the race of beings that Omega came from, which you should know since that was the name on the armor that you could get from the Omega raids, and we get to learn a lot more about them from the fates in the area and a dungeon which I have covered the story of on the channel. The lore dumps alone made this place incredible, but the music is what really pushed it to this spot on my list. And that leads us to the top spot, Elpis. This zone can't really be talked about at all without saying a lot of Endwalker stuff, So just in case you haven't made it to this part of the now 5-month-old story, I'll give you a quick countdown so you can leave without the spoilers. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, you're still here, so let's go. Elpis is a place that you get to once you use the crystal tower on the first to travel back in time to the world before it was sundered. Here you get to see the ancients perform creation magic, run around a bit with Emet-Selch, Hythlodaeus, and Vanah, and you even get to run a dungeon with them. Exploring the floating islands and seeing where the creatures that you fought all across the world in your own time were made is fantastic. Not to mention that getting to see how Emet-Selch, Hythlodaeus, and Azim, which is you, interacted with one another is by far one of the best parts of Endwalker. The Lodestone stories explain their friendship, but seeing how they acted in person gives major signs of the Seven Dawn vibes. It's also why this zone is my favorite, and it'll likely remain so until we head to the 13th Shard and I get to do some quests for Voidsent, because I think the plot twist that we're going to get in the next story is way different from what people might expect. So that's the end of my list. What were your favorite places to explore? Let me know in the comments down below, and be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, ding that notification bell, join the Discord, and if you want to support the channel, you can donate through the link in the description. Until next time, guys. Later. I'm pretty sure it's not a surprise that Final Fantasy XIV is a very big game with a very large story. Most of its main points are hit by doing the main scenario questline, but with the game expanding as much as it has, some side stories and raids have bled over into the main scenario. That means that if you miss certain side content, you'll end up missing certain key bits of information. So I figured I'd tell you guys 5 of the stories that should actually be mandatory, but they still aren't. The first one on this list is the A Realm Reborn Dragoon questline. This quest is important for one reason and one reason only. This is where you first meet Estinian. I mean, it does also lead into this little, not that important event called the Dragon Song War, but Estinian is by far the most important part of this. After he stole Nidhogg's eye from Ishgard and headed to Eorzea, the Ishgardians sent his predecessor to hunt him down. They were afraid that Nidhogg's eye being messed with would cause the dragon to attack again. Well, it turns out that Estinian had taken it because the dragon was already about to attack, and he had planned on using the eye to lure him away. Then he gets corrupted by the eye and tries to kill you, so you have to beat the crap out of him. This story introduces Estinian, like I said before, and it gives a reason why he both trusts your combat abilities and you as a person. It also lets you know that you'll be dealing with Nidhogg soon, and it shows that Estinian can be taken over by the dragon, something that's also important. The fact that this story is missed by everyone who refuses to play the floor tank is a serious problem because it has a whole lot of important stuff talked about in a very short time. The next story that is extremely important is Eden, the Shadowbringers 8-man raid series. The story follows Reen, Thancred, Urianger, the Warrior of Light, and eventually Gaia on a quest to restore the damaged world of the First. Not only is Eden the creature that caused the Flood of Light, it killed Minfilia. It honestly deserves a coffee biscuit for that because, well, I hated her. It's mean, I know, I don't care, she sucked. If you don't believe me, just think back to how many times you had to run to the Wakened Sands because there was no way to teleport straight there. Now, on a more important note, Eden turns out to be Matron, an Ascian who, along with the love of his life Logrif, who turns out to be Gaia, have been in charge of prepping the First for the rejoining. Ardbert and his allies defeated them. They killed Logrif and caused the Light Ether to turn Matron into the first Sin Eater. All of that is stuff that people need to know since this event is what caused you to end up on the First in the first place. But the most important part of this story is the healing of an ether damaged land. With what is very likely to be a focal point of 7.0, the fact that there is a method for repairing a destroyed world is something that will be talked about a lot, and if people don't know where it came from, they will definitely have questions. The third story on this list is the Warring Triad, which is the Heavensward Trial. Out in Azys Lla, 3 ancient icons known as the Warring Triad, who had been summoned way back during the war between Mera City and Allag, they are starting to break free. Mainly because of the Warrior of Light's battle with Thornton. The information comes by way of a mysterious young-seeming boy named Unakalai, who goes with you, Urianger, Kral, and Ishtola to deal with the icons. Since the Allagans had found a way to contain the Primals, the Garleans are obviously after it, which causes you to have to face off against regular Menhydras and the 6th Legion again. You fought him during the MSQ, but you never find out what happens to him unless you do this story. Along with finding out about Regula's fate, you learn about Unukalai, who is a fallen warrior of light from the void. He tells you bits and pieces about how the 13th shard fell, and considering the fact that Ishtola mentions him in the MSQ, it is highly likely that this quest chain will get the Crystal Tower treatment and will be made mandatory by the time 7.0 comes out. Unukalai ends up playing a major part in a side story involving the new Warriors of Light of the First, who are trying to restore the 13th shard. I'd hope that the story gets expanded on in 7.0, but considering the fact that you have to get a job of each type to 80 and complete 4 role quests to unlock it, I highly doubt that story will become a part of the main scenario. But hopefully they'll do some type of side content to keep that quest going because, well, it'll kind of suck if they just forget about it since, it took a lot of work to unlock it in the first place. The next story on this list is the Heavensward Raid series Alexander. The Goblin organization called the Illuminati because they never come up with original names summoned the primal Alexander, and they plan on using it to travel through time and rewrite history. The story is extremely important since it is the main reason that Shadowbringers even exists. Alexander was the reason that Sid was able to unlock the secrets of time travel. So in other words, the whole reason that the Scions are still alive at all is because of this one story that you can completely miss. Alexander is probably one of the most important primals in Final Fantasy XIV, aside from Hydaelyn and Zodiark, of course. But the story that is the most important to the lore is not Alexander, it's Omega. Omega is awakened at the end of Heavensward to fight Shinryu. Omega wins the fight, which is why the Guardians are able to detain the primal and Xenos is able to take his powers. Even more important than that, without Omega, the dragons never would have come to Aetheris, which means there would have been no war in Mericidia, no Bahamut, no Warring Triad, no Dalamud, no Nidhogg. Ishgard wouldn't have existed, no dragons. Pretty much the entirety of the story playing out as it had wouldn't have happened had Omega and the Omicron never attacked the Dragonstar. And during your adventure into Omega's simulation, another extremely important moment occurs. Midgard Sormer exhausts all of his power to keep Omega from killing you, which is why the dragon isn't around to help during the final days. So without playing through the Stormblood raids, people wouldn't have a clue as to why the dragon stayed out of what is the most important moment in the entire game. There are a lot more side stories that really should be mandatory, but I'll likely cover those in another video at a later date. For now, this is the end of my list. All of the stories I've mentioned here are covered on my channel, so I'll leave links in the description so you can catch up on them if you missed them. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, turn on all notifications, leave a comment because it helps with the algorithm, and donate to the channel to help me out. Until next time, guys. Later. In a game as big as Final Fantasy XIV, you obviously come across a lot of different characters. Some of them are very good and interesting with personalities that make you want to know their entire backstory, while others not so much. Today we're going to talk about the good ones, the characters that are so cool that you get excited every time you see them walk into a scene. So let's dive into a list of my 7 favorite characters in Final Fantasy XIV. Up first at number 7 is Leofard, the leader of the Red Bill Sky Pirates, and the owner of what has to be the best possible location for a house. And it's probably one that will lead to quite a few accidental deaths if you're not watching your step. You first meet the Sky Pirate in the Void Ark raid series, where he saves a cargo pilot from some pirates who are going around committing crimes and making all of them look bad. This man is so calm and cool under pressure that even facing down a void scent that is literally named Devil doesn't even faze him. In fact, the only reason he's so low on this list is because after he tries to ram Diabolos with his airship, we don't see much more of him. If we did get to hang out with him in a little bit more than Tataru's side quest, he probably would have been closer to the top of the list, but we don't, so he's not. Number 6 on this list is another pirate, Captain Jack of the Rogues Guild. I'm a fan of all things pirate. One Piece is my favorite anime. I love the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise, well, at least the early movies, because after the third one they got pretty bad. Assassin's Creed Black Flag was by far the best one in the series, you get the idea. And Jack and his fellow rogues are the embodiment of all things pirate. Jack is the knife-wielding, smooth-talking ladies' man whose old-timey swashbuckler language, instead of making him seem out of place in a world of airships and magic, just makes him that much more entertaining, especially when he starts to hang out with the very stiff Shinobi Oboro. Honestly, the two of them teaming up gives me a lot of Thancred Urianger buddy cop vibes. Having more quests that follow the two of them would make for some great television. It'd be like Hildebrand, but with a lot more stabbing. At number 5, I had to put Alisaie. And yes, picking a main character for this list is kinda lame, but Alisaie has been one of my favorites since Heavensward, so she had to get a spot. While she doesn't have nearly the character development of Alphinaud, honestly no one does, he went from the arrogant, insufferable know-it-all who got taught just how little he knew about the world, to being a genuinely competent leader. Alisaie, on the other hand, pretty much always knew who she was. She was the dive in head first and start stabbing things without thinking kind of person. At least it looks like that. She dives in, but she seems to always have a good idea of where she should be and what she should be doing, so her brash tactics usually makes things turn out for the best. Always been a fan of those types of characters, the ones that seem like they're acting without thinking, but really they're very calculating. And Alisaie has layers. She's tough, brave, but also vulnerable. You see that when she's worried about her brother, or when she realizes that out of all the scions, she's the most likely to turn into a blasphemy since she doesn't exactly have control of her emotions. She's self-aware, and she's been that way the entire time, which is why she's been one of my favorite characters since forever. Number 4 is Hilda, aka the Mongrel. This half-Elysian woman immediately earned her spot on this list because, let's face it, she's basically a snow pirate. She's foul-mouthed and likes to shoot stuff. If we had her join a sky pirate crew, she'd pretty much fit right in. Obviously, I have a type because so far most of the characters on my list are extremely similar now that I think about it. Either way, Hilda won me over in one scene. You were all having a discussion about saving Emmerich from the vault because his dad Thornton is kind of a prick when one of the members of the Heavensward comes strolling in. He calls you all heretics and sees you having a meeting, so he's like, I'm gonna have to clap you all in irons. And Hilda's like, what do you know? I already happen to have that iron on me, and she starts shooting at him right in the middle of a hotel. I'm paraphrasing a bit, but she showed that she doesn't care about the law, the government, or people's religion. She does what she wants when she wants, and that makes her cool. It's a shame that she got downgraded from the MSQ to the Machinist quest line, and now she's pretty much been forgotten. Number 3 on the list is Jarun Tia, aka the Crimson Duelist, Red Mage Trainer, Alisaie's Estinian, or Puss in Boots, because that's clearly who he's modeled after. Aside from the fact that this guy is the mentor for one of my favorite jobs, he's also one of those untapped wells of lore that is just waiting to be thrown at us. The man has connections with everything from the Scions to the students of Baldessian. He was there when Alamigo fell, he trained Alisaie on how to use red magic, he helped you deal with a highly powerful Void Sin, and despite all of that, we haven't seen him at all in Endwalker. When everyone gathered to head to Garlemald, Alisaie even mentioned him because she thought he'd be there, but for some reason he wasn't. I've been waiting to see an interaction between the two of them for the longest time now, and I really hope we get to see it soon. Still hoping he gets moved to the MSQ in the future, but you never know. Now these next two shouldn't be a surprise to anyone who's been following the channel for any length of time. Number 2 is arguably the best written villain in the long history of the Final Fantasy franchise, Emet-Selch himself, or if we're gonna go by his real name, Hades. Do I really need to go into why this guy is so great? He had the snarky attitude of Y'shtola, the swag of Thancred, the eloquence of Urianger, and the arrogance of a guy who just knew he was better than everyone else, and had all the tools to prove that he was. And in the midst of all that, we were able to empathize with him almost to the point where if you had been following him instead of the Warrior of Light from the very beginning of the story, you would be able to understand where he was coming from. Emet-Selch is a masterclass in creating an antagonist, and so far Square Enix hasn't managed to surpass him with Endwalker's boss, and I doubt they'll be able to do it with Golbez. Now we've reached the end of the list, and I'm pretty sure you all know who the number 1 is. It's obviously Minfilia. No, wait, that's from the wrong list. She's actually number 1 on another list that I'm writing about characters who got a lot of hate and deserved it. My mistake. The number 1 on this list is our enemy turned traveling companion turned friend, Estinian. When I first saw him back in A Realm Reborn during the Dragoon quest, I thought he was cool. Like a 7 feet tall Batman with jumping powers that may as well be called flying, and a habit of stabbing people with a spear that he didn't like. But it was in Heavensward where he really grew on me. He's Thancred but cooler, and they've only found more ways to enhance his cool factor with each expansion, all the way up to the moment where he finally joins the Scions. They use the same tactic that you've seen in countless other RPGs, where you bump into a powerful, cool character and they hang out with you from time to time, making you long for the day when they join your party. But 9 times out of 10, when they finally join your crew, they suck. They didn't do that with Estinian. He was the GOAT when you met him, and he stayed that way when he joined the Scions, and that's why he's number 1 on the list. So that's the end of this one. If you enjoyed it, hit the like button, subscribe, ding that notification bell. And if you want to show a little extra support, you can donate to the channel through the link in the description. Until next time, guys. Later. Every single video game has those moments that make you go, and Final Fantasy XIV is no exception. Here's a list of the 10 most epic moments in Final Fantasy XIV, and in case you didn't know, beware of spoilers, obviously. Number 10 is the moment when Gaius and Estinian fight Xenos. While the main Scions are on the first, Totaro and Krau convince, and by convince I mean stalk Estinian all throughout Kugane until he gives in to their demands, they convince him to help track down Black Rose, the Empire's bioweapon. This causes him to run into Gaius and his crew, who are on a similar mission. Since it only makes sense, the two of them team up and end up in Garlemald when Xenos murders his father. Seeing the Emperor die, Gaius attacks Xenos, and Estinian backs him up, ending with the two of them combining their signature moves to attack the Lich King 2.0. It doesn't do anything, and if Xenos hadn't decided to leave, both men would have likely ended up dead, but it was still a very cool moment to watch. Number 9 was epic more because I didn't expect it than anything else. It was the moment where Urianger showed you the real purpose of the move Rescue. After Ranjit cornered you and Y'shtola in the Ronkan Temple, Y'shtola, going by Master Matoya at the time, dove into the gaping hole to save the cure for the poison the Umorans had given to the Knights Blessed. This was noble, but Ranjit had already overpowered you once with his old man strength, and it was unlikely that the Warrior of Light would come out on top in this round either. Enter Urianger and Thancred. Before Ranjit could administer another whooping to the Warrior of Light, Urianger rescues him right into the pit. To make sure he falls, Thancred hops out and bashes him in the head with his gunblade, but the real winner of that round was Urianger, which is why you don't tick off your healers, at least during the time when Rescue's not on cooldown. Number 8 is the final battle of Stormblood, where Hien, Yugiri, and Lys hold off Elidibus until the Warrior of Light shows up. We all know that the Warrior of Light is strong, but this is a moment where we get to see just how strong we are compared to some of the other highly capable characters that we hang out with. After Xenos' death, Elidibus takes his body and joins the Garleans on the battlefield. This is the moment where Hien, Lys, and Yugiri triple team him to try and take down the sword-wielding Psycho. You take control of Hien and you fight the Ascian-controlled Garlean in a battle that is obvious that you can't win, while a bar on the side of the screen fills up slowly as the Warrior of Light sprints across the Gimlet Dark toward the battlefield. After Elidibus pulls off some magic with Xenos' massive Garlean body, something that Hien says is hardly fair, the samurai nearly blacks out, but not before the Warrior of Light arrives and demonstrates her superiority by fighting the Ascian one-on-one. It's a moment that wouldn't be out of place in any anime, and that's why it's on this list. Number 7 is the moment where Thancred shows that the best tank is a rogue. After the Scions got framed for the murder of the Sultana, they were forced to flee Ul'dah. Y'shtola used her trusty teleport spell that she's yet to get right to yeet her and Thancred away. She got lost in the livestream and Thancred lost his ability to wield ether and his clothes. While hunting for him, the Warrior of Light Y'shtola, Krau, and Alphinaud come face to face with Ardbert and his Warriors of Darkness, fresh from the first. You all start to get spanked, but Thancred jumps in wielding what I swear is a Keyblade from Kingdom Hearts, and holds off Ardbert himself. I'm sorry, but tanking as a rogue and not dying definitely earned Thancred some cool points. Not like he needed any more. Number 6 is the moment when Raoban overpowers all of Ishgard's champions with one arm just so he could fight you one-on-one. During Heavensward, in an attempt to bring the nations together, a contest is held where squads from all 4 major nations, Ishgard, Ul'dah, Gridania, and Limsa Lominsa, face off against one another because nothing brings people together better than a few punches to the face. During the match, Raoban swats everyone away like flies and creates a ring of fire around the two of you just because he wants to fight you. The fact that he has that much power with only one arm makes you wonder just how well could he have matched up to the Warrior of Light if Ilbert hadn't blindsided the Bull of Alamigo and cut his arm off. Number 5 is the moment when the Scions face off against Hydaelyn. I knew this fight was coming from the moment Vinod challenged us to a match in Elpis. What I didn't expect was the chance to do this fight as a trust with the Scions. In preparation for the mission to travel to Ultima Thule to defeat Meteon and stop the final days, the Scions go deep into the ethereal sea to talk to Hydaelyn. The goddess decides to test your worth and your ability to succeed when you come face to face with Meteon by using the power that she saved up to try and kill you all. The Scions, having killed a few gods in their time, take it in stride and face off against the being who they had served for a very long time. It was a cool moment, one that shows that while the Warrior of Light is strong, all of the major Scions are powerful in their own right, which brings up the question, which of the Scions is actually the strongest underneath the Warrior of Light? I'd say if we're talking about Crystal Exarch Grahatia, then it's definitely him. But with him not being able to wield the power of the Crystal Tower, I'd say it's a toss-up between him and Estinian, since Estinian is running around with the power of Nidhogg. Number 4 is the moment when Race Velger gives you his eye. After convincing Race Velger to help take down Estinian, who had been fully transformed into Nidhogg, he goes toe-to-toe with his brother in a battle that shakes the heavens, a battle that he loses badly. Nidhogg taunts him for his weakness, and he can't believe that Race Velger thought that he could avoid fighting for so long, yet still be a match for his brother who had been fighting for 1,000 years non-stop. The dragon admits that he never thought he could beat his battle-hardened brother, so he decided to give the power to someone who could. He reveals his missing eye, and Nidhogg sees the Warrior of Light powering up with the relic as she walks toward him. He roars at you and the final battle with Nidhogg begins. Moments like this one are why Heavensward is such a loved expansion. Number 3 goes to the moment when we get to see Shinryu again. After seeing Ultima Thule and experiencing the final days of so many different worlds, the Scions come face to face with the Endsinger. She proceeds to pummel them, going so far as to suck them up in a whirlwind and throw a planet at them. Having no other choice, the Warrior of Light uses the device the Loporus gave to her to teleport back to the ship and tosses it into the tornado to save her friends from certain death. But that left her alone with the creepy bird-faced lady. The Warrior of Light prepares to do her best and fight alone when the sky starts to crack and Shinryu flies in. Xenos wanted to fight the Warrior of Light so bad that he made a deal with Krau to help the Scions if she told him where they were. Then he ate what was left of Hydaelyn's ether and flew across the universe in dragon form. But he's confused about why your prey isn't already dead because it couldn't possibly be a match for you. Since the thing is an obstacle in the way of what he wants, the Warrior of Light and Xenos charge into battle together to face the Endsinger. When this first happened, I got caught completely off guard. I never expected to go into the final trial riding on Shinryu's back, but that moment was so cool that it still puts a smile on my face. Number 2 comes right after the last one, both in number and in the game. It's the moment where Xenos and the Warrior of Light finally get their rematch. With the Endsinger dead, the final days have been stopped. Etheris is saved, so your duty as a hero is done. Now the Warrior of Light can go back to her true calling as an adventurer, seeking greater and greater challenges and thrills. And the first one is having a test of your reflexes at the hands of your crazy stalker. Out at the edge of the universe, the Warrior of Light and Xenos have a fight that will make Goku and Vegeta proud, where they use every technique at their disposal, and despite having their health bars hit 0 multiple times, they keep fighting on sheer willpower alone, until the Warrior of Light hits Xenos with a Falcon Punch! And puts an end to the battles once and for all. That leads us into number 1, the single most epic moment in the game by leaps and bounds. The moment the Warrior of Light and Ardbert decide to fight as one. So after experiencing Emet-Selch's recreated Amarat, the Scions face off against the unsundered Ascian. While he reminds them of their true place in the food chain, the Warrior of Light struggles forward as the light ether consumes her from within. After all of the Scions fall and she begins to turn into a Sin Eater, Ardbert poses a question. If you had the strength to take another step, could you save both our worlds? The Warrior of Light gives him a look that says, "Why are you asking me that stupid question?" And Ardbert hands her his axe, saying, "Take it, we'll fight as one." Then the light bursts out of the Warrior of Light, fully in her control now that she's powered up, and for a second Emet-Selch sees her in her true form, Azem. Now let's not get it twisted, the Warrior of Light was going to get those cheeks clapped in a one-on-one fight with Emet-Selch, but Grahatia reaches out across time and space to summon more champions from across the rift to fight alongside you. Since you're ready to do this, Emet-Selch decides not to hold back. He puts on his mask and lets you know that his true name is Hades, and you're about to die. That moment easily took the top spot, and to be honest, they will never top this moment. Normally I'd ask what you guys think is the most epic moment, but there's no debate this time. You can shift things around in all of the other spots, but the lead up to the fight with Emmett Selk is by far the coolest moment in this game. If you enjoyed my list, support the channel through the link in the description and be sure to hit the like button and subscribe. Until next time guys, later. In a story as big as Final Fantasy XIV, there are plenty of memorable moments, and not all of those moments are happy. Here's a list of what I think are the 10 most tragic moments in Final Fantasy XIV. Number 10 is the moment Tesleen dies. When you first get to Norvrant and start to search for the Scions who had been taken to the First, you find Alice, who's been on the world for a year. She's been out near the border to the Empty fighting against Sin Eaters to protect the people at the inn at Journey's Head. She's become friends with those people, particularly with a woman named Tesleen, who takes care of the people who have been infected by the Sin Eaters. Unfortunately, not long after you arrive, Tesleen is transformed into a Sin Eater in a very gruesome scene that shows you just how high the stakes are in Shadowbringers. As icing on the cake, you have to kill the woman in the first dungeon, and it only gets worse from here. Number 9 is the moment where Ardbert is forced to stand by and watch his people die. Ardbert and the other warriors of Light of the First accidentally caused the flood that nearly destroyed the world. Then they, along with Minfilia, gave their souls to stop it, all except for Ardbert, whom Minfilia left behind for her own reasons. He walked the world for 100 years, unable to be seen or touch anything until you arrived. You started to save the First, restoring the night sky by defeating the Light Wardens, and it was going well until Valkyrie launched an attack on Lakeland. 2 soldiers are off alone, waiting for you to save them when a Sin Eater attacks. Ardbert tries his hardest to save them, but he phases right through the creature, and all he was able to do was close his eyes and listen to them die while wondering why he was forced to suffer like that after everything he had done to help people. Number 8 is the moment when Lena's entire squad turns into Sin Eaters and tries to kill her. During the attack on Lakeland that we mentioned earlier, Lena's entire squad is turned into Sin Eaters. That moment in itself is bad, but it's not all that tragic. What was the woman's response. With everything you had done by taking down the Light Wardens and restoring the night sky to a world that hadn't seen a clear sky in 100 years, the people had started to hope for a better future. And Lena not only saw that get ripped away from her friends, but they were people who looked to her for leadership and protection, and she had failed them. If this scene hadn't been voiced, it wouldn't have had the same impact, but hearing the actress's voice crack as the hard soldier exterior shattered under a wave of despair was enough to make the loss of hope feel very, very real. Number 7 is the death of Papalymo. After you beat Ilbert, the man reveals that he has both of Nidhogg's eyes, and he uses them in an attempt to summon a being as powerful as Bahamut had been. He summons Shinryu, and since you're all missing out on the much needed prep time that would allow you to deal with the Primal, Papalymo uses the same technique that Louisoix had used on Bahamut to hold Shinryu for long enough for the Scions to come up with a plan to deal with the Primal, permanently. Unfortunately, the spell kills the Lalafell in the process. I liked Papalymo, but I couldn't rank this death higher because you honestly don't spend much time with him in the game. All of the real emotional trauma comes from seeing how Lys deals with the loss, and if you've ever had a friend lose a loved one, then you know that seeing how hard it hits them tends to do a number on you as well. Number 6 is Moonbrida's death. This is one that's similar to Papalymo because you only really have a handful of time spent with Moonbrida, but her death does more to humanize Urianger, who up until you meet Moonbrida, he seems to be nothing more than a funny talking weirdo. Moonbrida shows up to help the Scions with the Ascian problem, but of course the Ascian Nobrialis, also known as Mutton Chops, shows up and seriously injures Moonbrida and captures Minfilia. You free her, but the Ascians are immortal, so he keeps attacking, but using Tup Samadhi and Moonbrida's very own life force, you manage to kill the Ascian with White Auracite. While Moonbrida does die from this, which hits Urianger hard, the woman should be credited with giving you the means to put an end to the Ascian threat. Number 5 is the moment that Hraesvelgr reveals to Iselle that she's not Shiva. This spot was a toss-up between Iselle's heroic sacrifice and this very moment. And I chose this one because while her body was still alive, this was the moment where Iselle truly died. From the first time you met and fought her, she believed that she truly was Shiva, the mortal who Hraesvelgr had fallen in love with and consumed so they would never be apart, which is still weird. She dedicated herself to reuniting the people and the dragons, bringing an end to the Dragon Song War after proving that the Ishgardians were actually the bad guys of the story. She traveled with the Warrior of Light, Alphino, and Estinian in an attempt to stop him from murdering dragons and teaching him to understand them because she genuinely believed that she was Shiva. Then she came face to face with Hraesvelgr, who flat out told her that he didn't know what she was, but she wasn't Shiva. Those words crushed her, and she just slumped down staring blankly, lost and confused with her entire reason for being gone, which in truth is a fate far worse than death. Number 4 is the moment when Urianger finally sees Moonbreeda's parents. From the moment you came to Sharlayan, it was clear that Urianger was uncomfortable being there, and you find out why the moment Moonbreeda's parents catch up to him. Since her death, he's been avoiding them because he blamed himself, and he figured that they'd blame him too. Her mom was extremely mad at him, but not because she blamed him for her daughter's death. She was mad because he spent all of that time mourning her by himself. Finally getting to hear about how long Moonbreeda and Urianger had been close, and seeing him mourn the woman he loved really tugs on the heartstrings because it makes you relive the death of someone that you thought you'd gotten over way back in A Realm Reborn. Number 3 was the moment when you found out that Alphonse had been turned into the diamond weapon. Now I could have just put the entire Sorrow of Worldlich storyline in this spot and called it a day, because every moment in that story was just rough. Seeing each of Gaius' children sacrifice themselves one after the other for the sake of getting the power of the weapons so they could free their homeland from the Empire was something that could be respected, even if you're someone who sees Garleans and automatically thinks that they're evil. But after seeing how Valens treated Gaius' adopted children and how they stayed to keep him from torturing other kids, as well as the whole burn out the bad torture scene, it became pretty clear that this story was not going to end well. But the most horrifying moment came when Allie went to steal the diamond weapon to rescue her last remaining sibling Alphonse, only to discover that the man was far worse than dead. His mind had been merged with the diamond weapon to make a brand new control system called the Overmind. For anyone who missed it, this was a Full Metal Alchemist reference, Alphonse losing his body and having it replaced with a big suit of armor and all of that. It was a terrible moment in Full Metal Alchemist, and it wasn't any better here. And the fact that the revelation caused Allie to go into shock made it all the worse. Number 2 is one that everybody already knew would be on this list: the death of Lord Haurchefant. This is what happens when you spend a lot of time with a character who is genuinely likable. I haven't really met anyone who hates Haurchefant because he didn't give you a reason to. From the minute you first met him out in Kurthus, he was a likable guy, and that grew when he helped the Warrior of Light, Alphino, and Tataru escape to Ishgard after the whole Crystal Braves fiasco. He rode in the battle to help you countless times, so the fact that he died saving you from a shot to the back was a moment that affected the Warrior of Light and the player base a lot. That regret carries over into the Dark Knight questline, and even though the Ellison's been dead for years, his dying words of "a smile better suits a hero" still tugs on the heartstrings to this day. Number 1 is a moment that was even more traumatic than the loss of a close friend. It was the moment when you were forced to search for a lost family that nearly ended with a baby transforming into a blasphemy. When the final days fully began, it was total chaos. But true to form, the Scions got to work helping people calm down so they wouldn't turn into monsters, while dealing with the ones who changed. This caused the Warrior of Light, Matsia, and the twins to run around tracking a couple who had a newborn baby. You found the husband moments before he died from his injuries that he took protecting his wife and child, and with a bit more searching you found a mother running with her baby while a monster was in hot pursuit. The twins attacked it, but Alice got swatted away, and the Warrior of Light could only watch in horror as the woman's head was crushed and her corpse, along with the baby in her arms, was thrown into a lake. You pull the baby free only to get surrounded by blasphemies, and you're forced to hand the baby off to Matsia, who tries to carry it to safety while you and the twins deal with the creatures. As he flees, the baby starts to cry and begins to transform too. It was all terrible. But even though the infant survives, having her lose both of her parents in such a gruesome way when the heroes who normally save the day were so close by made this moment take the top spot on this list. So that's my list. What moments tugged on your heartstrings? Let me know in the comments down below. Hit the like button, share the video, and if you want to show your support, you can donate to the channel through the link in the description. Until next time guys, later. There are some super interesting stories in Final Fantasy XIV, which is one of the main reasons why I started this channel in the first place. But out of all of the stories, I obviously like some of them better than others. So here's my list of my top 5 favorite stories in Final Fantasy XIV. Number 5 is the story of the ninja. Ninja has been one of my favorite jobs since I played Final Fantasy Tactics years ago. Actually, it's been decades now. I like the fighting style, and the characters made it way cooler in Final Fantasy XIV. All of the rogues are cool and well written, with unique personalities that I'm glad you get to keep seeing even after the story switches over to the ninja side. Now, while the rogues are cool, the real MVP is Karasu. The guy is completely nuts, and the way he gets on Oberon's nerves makes every scene the two of them are in together feel like a buddy cop show, even though they are technically enemies. Now, number 4 is the story of the Shadows of Ma'ak. Now, I love all things Voidsent, so when you link the story of Voidsent with pirates, you get into some interesting bits of storytelling. Leofar and the Red Bills remind me of the Rogues, which is probably why I enjoyed being around them so much. But going through the Ma'aki ship, the Void Ark, where they very stupidly were using the Voidsent to power the thing, and finding the very weird familiar Kite Sith before fleeing for your lives when Diabolos attacks, all leads into some very interesting storytelling with a whole lot of characters that I really hope we get to see more of later. Now, the third on my list is the story of the Dark Knight. This story is primarily about the internal struggles of the Warrior of Light, from the growing irritation at how people constantly get you to carry out the most mundane of tasks, to the regret over being strong but still too weak to save a lot of your friends. It was one of the stories that hit closest to home, because while we aren't all superpowered warriors, we have all dealt with grief, loss, and failure, which is honestly why I think so many people love the Dark Knight story. It's definitely the reason that I like it. Number 2 is the story of the Red Mage. For starters, outside of Estinian, Zerun Tia is my favorite character. The guy has been involved with everything, literally, even trained Alizé. So when he offers to train you as a Red Mage, it leads you to finding Arya, who turns out to be a descendant from a bloodline of mages who have Voidsent blood. And that leads you to fighting a super Voidsent named Lilith, and the story becomes extremely interesting. But again, I really like Voidsent, and that's what made this story one of my favorites. Now, number 1 on this list is the Return to Ivalice. Final Fantasy Tactics was probably my favorite Final Fantasy game, period. I'm pretty sure I've mentioned that a few times before by now, but just in case you didn't know, now you do. The War of the Lions was a well put together story, and having it brought over into Final Fantasy XIV was a dream come true. Of course, they made some slight alterations to make the story fit more into the world of Final Fantasy XIV, but the way the story played out, getting to visit some of the locations from the world of Ivalice, and getting to fight people like Agrias and TG Sid were major nostalgia moments for anyone who enjoyed that game. And the ending, where you get to see Ramses' entire team, was perfect, which is why this was my favorite story in game by far. Now, if you want to know more about these particular stories, they've all been covered on the channel, so go and check them out. And tell me in the comments what your favorite stories were in Final Fantasy XIV. Also, be sure to like, share, subscribe, join the Discord server, and if you really want to support, you can become a member of the channel. So until next time, guys, later. With the conclusion of the Myths of the Realm raid, we now have 5 Alliance raid series in Final Fantasy XIV, which, considering the fact that each of them have 3 parts complete with bosses and lore, that's a lot of stuff. But how do they stack up against one another? In a lot of ways, comparing them is unfair. It's clear that over time the scale of the spectacle has improved, the areas look more polished, and some of the encounters have gotten exponentially cooler simply because the development team has more things to draw on to create their bosses. But there's one area where graphical and mechanical enhancements don't change the quality of the instance, and that's the story. Each of these raids have their own story that expands the lore of Final Fantasy XIV as a whole. So what we're going to compare is which stories were the best and which ones fell short. Everyone has their own opinion on what they feel is the best or worst story, and since I spend way too much time analyzing this game's lore, it only makes sense that I share my list with you all. So here's my ranking of the Alliance raid stories from worst to best. The minute I mention story, a lot of people probably already guessed that at the bottom of my list would be the Nier crossover Yorha Dark Apocalypse. I'm a big fan of Nier. I 100% completed the PS3 version of Nier and its replicant re-release, as well as Nier Automata, and mixed in with all of the weirdness and meta commentary that's been a part of the Dragon Nier world since forever, is a story that I really like. The problem with the Nier crossover is twofold. The first one's pretty obvious. This isn't a Nier game. It's Final Fantasy, so all of the stories have to expand the world of 14 in some way. Characters have to be made that have some type of impact on the world overall, and that didn't happen here. The second problem is the MMO medium doesn't work for telling a Nier story as a side quest. The stories are too complicated and have too many twists and turns to simply fit into a 3-patch quest chain. There would be holes, unanswered questions, and things left undone that wouldn't happen when Nier is happening in its own world. The references to all of their lore was cool, but that's only because I've played all of the games. People who haven't wouldn't have enjoyed those, so from a story perspective, this was easily the worst Alliance raid. If we were talking about aesthetics and bosses, this one is tied with my favorite raid. But we're not talking about that, so Your High Dark Apocalypse can enjoy the number 5 spot. Number 4 belongs to the newest raid series, Myths of the Realm. This story started off doing everything right. It focused on world elements that people have been interested in for years and did what every story strives to do. It got people interested. From the minute Birago the bodybuilder said that the 12 were not primals and sent the students of Valdecian on a mission to find out what they were and what they were planning, the story sucked you in. The problem came when you realized that even though we were supposed to be done with Hydaelyn after the main story of Endwalker, it turns out that the 12 are nothing more than versions of the ancients who supported Vana in her mission to sunder the world and let mortals guide their own path. They're the Watcher if people knew about him and prayed to him. And what was their goal with bringing you into their realm and fighting you? To die so their energy could go back to the planet. Not for any specific purpose, not to end a great threat or make some of the inhospitable areas of Aetheris more habitable. Nope, it was just to allow the prayers of man to power the planet instead of them. And if the ether is needed, I guess people will be able to use it. But they won't, because they won't know about it. Because if you tell the world that the gods are dead, things will likely go to crap. So in other words, we found out that the 12 were nothing special and they sucked at their job, since their method of non-intervention extended to letting mortals figure out how to deal with their unsundered Zodiac-loving counterparts. So while the spectacle was great and the story was good up until the finale, the ending was average at best and doesn't really do much more than put an end to a group of beings that could have been far more interesting than they were. Number 3 is the Shadows of Ma'at series. This story has everything to make a very well-rounded plot filled with interesting characters in the Sky Pirates and Kite Sith, a good villain with Diabolos, and expanding on the War of the Magi in ways that left plenty of room to give you more info about what is one of the most underexplored eras in the history of Eorzea. The Red Bills are some of the best side characters who have been interesting every time they pop back up in the story, and the fact that the story of this raid technically starts in the dungeons Amdapor Keep in the lost city of Amdapor shows that the roots of this story had been set long before it even got fully underway. That's probably why it was so satisfying. Number 2 is the Return to Ivalice series, and honestly, had it not been for the fact that the Crystal Tower series basically got upgraded to part of the MSQ and had an entire expansion built around it, this would have been my favorite story. And while Final Fantasy Tactics is my favorite Final Fantasy game, that's only a very small part of why I enjoyed this story so much. In fact, up until the story got expanded with Bajda, Return to Ivalice was beneath the Shadows of Ma'at series on my story enjoyment meter. But the excitement of hanging around with the descendants of Ramsus' bloodline, facing off against his friends before duking it out with Ultima after getting help from the Dalmascan resistance, drew you into a side story that was potentially as large as some AAA game titles. And that story continued with the Save the Queen series, which was also fantastic when it comes to making the world of Final Fantasy XIV feel so much larger in scale than the handful of areas that we constantly travel to. There are other lands out there complete with their own history and relics, and it's all waiting for us to explore them. My only gripe is the fact that they decided to end the story with the equivalent of an email instead of letting us experience how it would have all turned out. And that leads us over to number 1, which is of course the Crystal Tower series. There's honestly not that much that needs to be explained about why this story sits at the top of the list. The Allagans in this tower are pretty much responsible for everything that happened from Shadowbringers onward. And comparing this story, which is fully a part of the MSQ, to the others is downright unfair. But since it's on the Alliance roulette, it gets the top spot, and it will likely keep it forever because Square Enix loves making us use this tower over and over again. Anyway, that's my list. Do you agree with it or disagree? Love it or hate it? Let me know in the comment section below. Also, be sure to hit the like button and share the video. Donate to the channel if you can. and I'll see you all next time.